welcome to a live Kerfefe break on Deprogrammed with Keri Smith. I'm your host, Keri. Welcome to some familiar faces. I see you guys. Keri likes a dramatic entrance. Hey, I actually have a question about the entrance. If you have a second, could you let me know in the comments or the chat? Is the intro song a lot louder than the regular volume? Because I did have someone say that to me, and I think I've adjusted it, but I'm not sure. So somebody told me the intro song like blows out their eardrums compared to everything else. So if that's the case for you, just let me know. Welcome if it's your first time here. This is a live show I do on Mondays and Fridays where we just hang out and try and have a good time and make sense of what is increasingly a crazy world. Um, Sometimes have guests. This Friday, actually, I should just say this now. Oh, I'm so excited. I've got to do the artwork for this. But Friday at this time during this show, we do this at 1 o'clock Central now. This is the new time. Friday show is going to be a fun panel show. I want to do a discussion and review of the movie Nefarious. I had several people recommend this film to me. I believe it's on Amazon is where you can see it. And I finally watched it and it gave me a lot to think about, especially if you're a Christian, I would suggest it, but you don't have to be. It's a thriller. If you like dark kind of stuff, it's about demons. I'll just say that. That's all I'll say. I think the dialogue's very good. And one of the actors is just really impressive. Um, and then, I have some criticisms, but in general, I think it's a very good film. And so this Friday, we're going to have a weirdo Christian panel discussion. I call it that because I know some of the atheists are like, oh, not a weirdo Christian panel. It's going to be me and some other hosts who happen to be Christian discussing the film, different things that made us think about afterwards. So if you want to watch it before Friday at 1, before we do this, you've got a whole week to go watch Nefarious now. And on the panel is going to be Odin from Odin's movie blog, Michelle from Force of Light, maybe both sisters, I'm not sure, but Force of Light is coming, and Brahmable is coming, possibly my friend Greg Wilson, and then I have invites out to a couple other people, so we'll see. But I'm very excited. So again, Odin, Force of Light, Brahma, that's who I know for sure is going to be there. Friday, 1 o'clock, we're going to do a big Nefarious show. So you've got a week to go see it if you want to not be spoiled. Jonas says demons. So my ex-wife's biography? Maybe. I don't know. This movie was sort of in the Venn diagram of things I'm interested in because I like horrors, I like thrillers, I like darker kind of content sometimes, true crime, stuff like that, thrillers. And then I'm a Christian, and then I'm lately have been reading some stuff by Derek Prince about demons, and so it was just sort of in that wheelhouse. And yeah, I thought it was very interesting. A weird Christian panel, says Thomas. Pirates most affected. LL. That would be great if Pirate is our for sure mod that day. I hope I'm gonna reach out and be like, Pirate, can you be the atheist mod? You could put us in a timeout. uh anyway, so that's Friday. Okay. What else? I have a poll up. I have it at 2 places. If you could take it at Twitter, if you're on Twitter, or I guess it's called X now. But if you could take it on Twitter, that's probably ideal because that's where the most people are taking the poll. But if not, you could take it here at YouTube. I have it on the community page. If you're interested in helping, no pressure. And the poll is I'm just very curious, and I'm writing some stuff about woke, and I'm just very curious about the people who follow me. Uh, if they were ever woke, were you woke? So the poll says, were you woke? Did you leave it? Will you tell me your story? Were you never woke? And if so, like, what do you think made you immune to it? And then I have different options. I was never woke. I was woke but left it. I was woke adjacent. I am currently woke. And it's only been up for a couple hours, I think. And it's pretty interesting what some of the results are so far. Actually, I'll just show you what some of the results are currently. I'm going to have it up for 7 days. I want to get as many people who follow me anyway to see this and take the poll if they have time. Look at this. So far, 70% of the people were never woke. 10.9%, like 11% of the people were woke but left it. I think that's pretty high, actually, for such a fringe ideology. I think that's really encouraging. 11% who were woke and left it. I don't know. Do you guys think that's not very? I think it's high. And then I was woke adjacent, and then presumably left it. The poll wouldn't let me put in more words like was woke adjacent and left it, but since it's in the past tense, I think it's obvious what that means. And so that's like 17.5%. So I think of woke adjacent as the people who are just kind of going along, who haven't really examined it. As someone in the comments said, I had so many interesting comments, and someone in the comments said, I kind of went along with all of it, and she said, I was really lazy. I never questioned any of it. I never looked into any of it. She was like, I never forced my beliefs on people, though. I never pushed it on people. I wasn't like a zealot. I wasn't one of these people who'd scream at you and force it on you. I just kind of copy pasted woke talking points or would repeat them like an NPC. And I kind of view that as woke adjacent, but also just there are probably other ways to define that word, but if you think that applies to you, that's what that means. And so I think that's maybe a lot of the people who are waking up. You can see it's almost double of the people who were like thoroughly woke and left it. 17.4% were woke adjacent. And in the comments, a lot of those kind of people are saying, this is what really pushed me over. For some, more than one, several people said it was that they were or are currently still very left, but not woke. And that they got into, they're into leftism. They're very class conscious. None of them describe themselves as a Marxist, but I know there are some Marxists who are also very upset with woke, because woke kind of is it's not Marxism. It came from Marxism, but it's a mutation. It's about identity, not class. It says the world is best described as a competition for power among identity groups. And Marxism says it's a competition for wealth among class groups. And so for some of these people who are responding, who said they either were or still are very left, but never became woke, they were like, it's because I saw it come in and destroy class consciousness or destroy Occupy Wall Street. And this whole identity thing of this war between identity groups just sort of took the focus off of classism. So that's interesting. And then there are some people, and they're saying, I was never woke. Those people, the majority of the people, I was never woke, 70%, are very interesting to me, because I want to know what inoculated you against it. And so people are like telling me about their childhood, family members who were behind the Iron Curtain, being able to observe totalitarianism up close when they were kids, or in some cases having parents who gave them a good foundation, who gave them a different belief system that helped inoculate them against this one, who for some that was Christianity, for others it was one person was talking about their liberal parents who instilled this great love of the arts and history in them. And a lot of people said, oh, I had read too much history. I was too much into history to fall for it, because I recognized it immediately. And I'm like, that's so interesting. So anyway, if you have time to take the poll and you're on Twitter, which is now called X, you can go and take the poll, or you can do it here on the YouTube community page. And I appreciate everyone has time to do that. I'm just very curious about it, and hopefully you'll be interested in some of the results too. Okay. So that was another announcement. And then let's see. I have a book here. Okay. Let me see if I can put this website on the screen first. So a friend of mine has written a children's book called Anti-Woke Baby. It's a baby's book. And it's kind of a play on, some of you know, there's a very awful woke, like, programming kind of book out there called Anti-Racist Baby. there's a lot of terrible baby books now. I just looked through one the other day that's teaching babies. Like it's actually a hard cardboard book, like one of those where you can't tear the pages, or like the baby's, if he's teething on it, can't destroy it. And it's about non-binary for a baby. Anyway, my friend has written a book called Anti-Woke Baby, and Henry Rogers is a pseudonym. And you can get this book at antiwokebaby.org. Here, I'm going to put it up on the screen. This screen. There we go. And it's really well done. The illustrations are great, and I like the message of it for a baby. And here on the website, you can see it says a refuge for reason and free thought. It can be difficult to articulate what we want to say sometimes, especially on complex, important topics. And it goes on to just explain what the book is about. And I'll just show you some of it real quick, because I think it's great. And I think if they're going to start like trying to indoctrinate people right out the womb, we need to have some other baby books. So this one, it says dedicated to the truth seekers, the free thinkers, and torchbearers of hard-won rights for all. And then you can see here on the first page here, let me take this off so you can see. I mean, the illustrations are really nice. And I'll just read the first 2 pages. It says, Anti-Woke Baby seeks what is real with sincerity and grace. He knows the West is an idea more than any one place. Anti-Woke Baby knows our shared history, culture, and worldview have brought more health, wealth, and freedom to humanity than all other ways of life. She knows this is a truth that's worth protecting, promoting, and valuing to save humanity from unnecessary strife. And then there's little rules in here. So it's like this first one, number 1, tell the truth. Always be honest. Anything less will not do. Live not by lies, but only by what you really know to be true. So it's like really great principles. And see the individual, be responsible for your own thoughts, know your history. Speaking of the importance of history, understand why it's unique. The West is a culture built upon ideals, not just one race. There's nowhere else quite like it where such a colorful tapestry vibrantly takes place. It's all rhyming. Number 6, take action to stay free. Number 7, celebrate and give thanks. Number 8, be humble in all that you do. Number 9, have faith that goodness will win. And I believe that's the end. So anyway, it's antiwokebaby.org. Okay. I really like this baby book. That's why I wanted to take the time to show it to you. Some of you got kids or grandkids. It's kind of cute. They probably won't know all those words, but when they get older, ages 3 to 5, says Arnawa. I don't know. I think this is over the head of some adults that I know, actually, right? Like, there are a lot of adults who don't know the lessons in this book. Maybe you should just buy this for the adult human in your life who's still in woke. Like, thought you might enjoy this. It's got some good pictures. It rhymes. There's lots of different races and genders. Okay. Okay. You guys, it's so good to see you. It's so good to see you, and happy Monday. I've got a topic. Oh, wait, one other last announcement, I promise. After this show today at like an hour after we're going to end, probably at 4:00 Central Time, Texas time, my husband's going to be a guest on that 70s rock fan show. So if you already know who that 70s rock fan is, awesome. If you don't, he's here on YouTube, and I'll put a link up in the comments, or maybe if there's a mod around, they can put it in the comments for me. If not, I'll do it I'll do it at the end. Anyway, that 70s rock fan, it should be really fun. If you want to come hang out, I'm going to hang out in the chat and just heckle. I'm kidding. No, but I am going to be in the chat. Come hang out with us. My husband's name is Anthony Garcia. You can find his channel here on YouTube and his music at anthonygarciamusic.com. And he's got a new album of like Spanish guitar, classical guitar music coming out next month. And so I assume they're going to be talking about that a little bit, but really just like, rock and roll, classical music, all kinds of stuff. So that should be fun. And that's happening today at 4. Okay. Let's get started with the topic. So one of the things, I'm still friends with some people who are in the woke world. If they didn't unfriend me, I'm not going to unfriend them. Why would I do that? Because I believe people can change their beliefs. And I also believe that just because you're in an evil ideology or an evil belief system, that doesn't make you evil. Are there evil people in it? Yes. I've met some of them. Yeah. But is everyone who's in it evil? No. There are lots of people in this life who get conned either by an individual in a romantic relationship who cons them, some kind of personality disorder person cons them, who get conned by multi-level marketing schemes. Sometimes people who get conned by different types of cults. And this happens to smart people too. Look at some of the most famous cults throughout history. Heaven's Gate. I mean, a lot of those people have very high IQs, very intelligent. I believe some of them were computer engineers. It's not a thing. It's not about IQ. People can get conned into things. People can get conned into bad, evil belief systems. And throughout history, we've seen that happen. And it's weird to think that, like, oh, we're just different at this time in history. We're so smart now. We're so immune to all that. And that's not true. So people do get conned into things. People can also leave those things. If you're familiar with Daryl Davis, I've gotten to meet him a couple times now. He's a very inspirational guy and musician, black guy who has brought like over 200 white guys out of the KKK just by befriending them. He is a person who believes that you are not necessarily evil because you're in an evil ideology, and that people can leave, and he's helped people leave. And I know people who I interviewed. Jack Buckby was one of my first interviews on Deprogrammed. Jack Buckby, if you haven't seen that interview, it's super interesting because he and I have similar stories, except he was not in the extreme woke left like me. He wasn't in that cult. He was in the extreme right. He was in the alt-right. He was a poster boy when he was 18. He was the face of the white nationalist movement in the UK. He left white nationalism. He left that evil ideology, and he works today by writing books and doing lectures and speaking on shows to pull people out of that belief system. And he's had success. I've had success talking to people about woke, pulling people out of woke. I know so many people now who've left it, who I've met at different events or met on the show or met at, in real life. And there are lots of people leaving it. Just that poll that I just showed you guys, how many people are leaving. It's incredible. So I'm a person who believes that people can leave woke. And for that reason, I am still friends with people who are in it because, well, one of the things that's bad about cults is that it's bad about woke is that they encourage you to unfriend people who are not believers and to cut people off and to, it's very cult-like in that way. And so I'm a person who believes people have to be able to understand what you believe based in part just on your behavior. Like, even if you never said anything, just based on how you behave, that whole expression, be the change you want to see in the world. Like, you have to behave what you believe. And so, I don't believe in isolating myself in an echo chamber. And I think it's wrong that woke encourages people to cut people off. And so I'm not going to cut people off just because they're in an evil ideology. I follow all kinds of people and all kinds of evil ideologies. So, it doesn't mean they are evil. Sometimes they are, but not all of them. So, all of that being said, because I'm still friends with some people in that world, I know that they seem to have some kind of blind spot where they're unable to see how children are being indoctrinated into the very ideology they're in, or how they themselves were indoctrinated into it, because they're still in it. And so I know when they look at the world and they look at what's happening culturally now that people are speaking up, pushing back, parents are getting involved at school board meetings, joining groups like Moms for Liberty. They see all this happening and they don't understand it. They're like, some of them think it's, oh, it's just crazy right wingers and right wing extremism, and that they've created some boogeyman that, kids are being indoctrinated. They don't really get it. And I'm hoping some of them are watching the show today, because I would like to shed some light on this, on just, the ways in which they are spreading ideologies in schools. So let me actually start with this. This is something that blew up in the past couple weeks. There was a big Moms for Liberty conference. Excuse me. And they got into trouble. There was a ton of negative, of course, mainstream press and attacking of them on social media. And what happens is the propaganda starts, at that level. It starts at the news level in some cases, and then it gets filtered down until it gets to these sort of woke or woke adjacent people who are not plugged in. They don't have a clue what's really happening in the world, and then they just repeat the talking points. And so I saw some of these people just like these sort of like the Stephen King kind of just very disconnected boomer who has no idea what's going on. Like, that's how I view Stephen King now. He's just like not living in reality. And so some of these people, they're like that. They're like, and I saw them tweeting or posting things on Facebook. A lot of these people are on Facebook, not Twitter. And they're like, uh, Moms for Liberty supports Hitler, and Moms for Liberty is they're extremists, and they're repeating these headlines about how they're extremists and they support Hitler. I'm like, that's crazy. What are you talking about? A lot of them haven't looked deeply to see why they're saying that. They just say it. Like those people who are responding to my poll. They just say things. They just repeat things. They don't even look. I guarantee you most of them have not even looked at the newsletter, the Moms for Liberty newsletter that started all this. But here, we're going to look at it. There was a chapter of Moms for Liberty, and you can see here, I don't know if I can make this larger. No, it's getting smaller. What's happening? I'm going to read this to you. So you see that yellow box there? Right, and it's got a little arrow pointing to a gray box. So the gray box is a quote by Adolf Hitler. It says Adolf Hitler, and the quote is, "He alone who owns, all caps, owns the youth, gains the future, all caps, gains. He alone who owns the youth gains the future." And they attribute it to him. And then in the yellow box, they have context with a little arrow pointing up, and it says, "The quote from a horrific leader should put parents on alert. If the government has control over our children today, they control our country's future. We, the people, must be vigilant and protect children from an overreaching government." Yeah. Yes. Okay, so this, if you heard this and you didn't know where it came from, this is what they're using to try and say that the Moms for Liberty support this horrific leader who they called a horrific leader. They're using his quote to warn people. This is the way he thought about children, owning the youth, gaining the future. And by the way, this is the way almost everyone has thought about children if they thought about impressionable minds or indoctrination, or even the foundation of like who a person is. There's another quote, and so I included this in here. Let me stop sharing this. I included this in my response to someone about it. Someone on Twitter who was going along with this smear and saying, yeah, because they quoted Hitler, that means they support Hitler. What do we really want to go to a place where we're like, oh, you can't quote a bad guy to point out what's wrong about what that bad guy said? Is that really the world that we want to live in? The standard that we're going to start holding people to? You can never quote someone who's evil to point out what evil is? What? So here, I'm just going to read what I said because I was more concise then than I would be now. I said, oh no, Time magazine quoted that exact same Hitler quote. And it's an article there about the Hitler Youth that we're going to look at in a second. But Time used that exact same quote to make the same frickin' point that Moms for Liberty was making, which is that he knew the importance of indoctrinating people when they're young, just like the woke do. So then I said, what you're doing here is participating in a dishonest smear campaign against Moms for Liberty that alleges no one can ever quote a bad guy in history to point out how bad guys think. How on earth are we to engage in pattern recognition and prevent history from rhyming if we can't even talk about what bad guys said and believed? The Hitler quote, "He alone who owns the youth owns the future," is the recognition by a bad guy that to indoctrinate, it was best for him to target the young. This is not uncommon knowledge. Here's another link that discusses the quote. What you're doing is joining a dishonest pile-on and pretending that to be aware of the ways in which bad guys with bad intent can and do target impressionable and developing minds of children is somehow an endorsement of those bad guys. It's not. It's not an endorsement. It's an indictment. Moms for Liberty's entire purpose is to protect children from indoctrination by bad actors. Of course, they're going to be aware of and try to raise awareness of the ways in which bad guys throughout history have targeted the youth. Here's another quote, which says something pretty similar. Aristotle said, "Give me a child until he is 7, and I will show you the man." Is there anyone out there who disagrees that children have more malleable and impressionable minds than adults? That if a bad actor wants to indoctrinate, they will likely try to target the youth? That parents would do well to protect their children from bad actors and to surround them with mentally healthy role models, most especially in their formative years? I'm sorry there's so much disdain in my voice. I just think so much of this is so dishonest. Like, any of the people who actually looked at the flyer that this all stemmed from, if they have any integrity at all, they can't say with a straight face, "Oh, Moms for Liberty is supporting Hitler," like they were saying. Like, they're liars. Only a dishonest person could say that, having looked at that. I do not understand it, other than you're a liar. Like, you're either a liar or you're very dumb. I just don't get it. So, somebody said in regards to my response there, he was like, well, Time went into the effort to build an entire article of context around this quote. Similarly, here, you discussed the quote within appropriate context. That's all it would have taken. The Moms for Liberty chapter in question did not. It was a standalone pull quote with zero context. I was like, excuse me, they said the quote from a horrific leader should put parents on alert. If the government has control over our children today, they control our country's future. We, the people, must be vigilant and protect children from an overreaching government. End quote. What more is necessary? Are we to insult the intelligence of the reader or assume ill intent on their behalf always? Like that's a position this kind of ridiculousness puts us in, is like, if I'm putting this newsletter together, do I have to go, wait a minute, my audience is the people who are going to see this, half of them are going to be the woke leftists who I'm talking about, I'm warning people about, and they're going to hate this. And so they're purposefully going to misconstrue it. So I'm going to have to be more careful with how I quote this bad guy I want to quote. Or do you have to also think like, wait a minute, people are stupid. So like I've got to people are not as smart as I'm going to insult the intelligence of everyone reading this and assume they're idiots when I write it, that they can't tell that when I say this is a horrific leader, I mean this is a horrific leader. What? I don't want to live in that world where we assume everyone is a freaking liar with bad intent or an idiot. I understand being, knowing that your words are going to be misused by enemies. I get that. But I just think that's a bridge too far to be like, oh, you can't speak at all. You can't even quote a bad guy ever. So this happened, and I'm sure some of you, those who are online a lot, saw it. And it just made me think about what they're saying here, which is about indoctrinating the youth. And this quote by this very bad, horrific leader about indoctrinating the youth. And that brought me back to this whole idea that some people have on the left, where it's like they think that it's an exaggeration, or that people on the right are just hysterical, or they have this boogeyman they're making up about indoctrination. And by the way, it's not just people on the right. That's the other thing. They think of all of us as people on the right. They have some stereotype in their head. So if you criticize woke, like, they don't see any nuance or distinction. And you can be someone like Jimmy Dore, who's to the left of them, who's super left, and they just call him a right winger because the way they think is so binary. So here's an article that's a good example of what I'm talking about. This is from Education Week, so you know it's gonna be good. Okay. And look, they have a whole section in Education Week called Equity and Diversity. Okay, guys. So it's in the equity and diversity section. The headline is, "What's driving the push to restrict schools on LGBTQ issues?" Now, this was written last year in 2022, so that's before the woke memo went out. They got to add some more letters. Let's not fault him for not having the IA2 Spirit Plus on there. His own allies would fault him, but let's not fault him for not having that on there. Okay, so we scroll down, and you've got an adult and a child here with a rainbow flag sign saying, "Protect our out children." How are your children out? Like, that is a little kid next to you. That kid's so little, they're not even tall enough. They don't even come to your waist. What does that mean, to be out? Why do you have a kid that young who's like talking about, "I'm gay"? And look, the little kid's holding a sign that says, "Proud to say gay." Hmm. I wonder if this child has it been influenced at all by anyone in their life. Maybe this guy here to the right? I don't know. Okay, let's just read through this. A raft of legislation in the state houses taking aim at LGBTQ students this year draws from the newly ascendant discourse about parents' rights, curriculum transparency, and schools purportedly indoctrinating students via critical race theory and other ideas. But what is driving it? To get a now, this is just really funny to me because this author here never, ever, ever allows for the possibility that what's driving it is truth. That what's driving it is like, yeah, students are being indoctrinated. This like, no, there must be something else. Okay, but what's driving it? To get a better sense of the rapidly evolving political landscape and accompanying rhetoric, Ed Week spoke to political scientists, historians, LGBTQ advocates, legal scholars, and the lawmakers themselves. Let me ask you, did you speak to any of the parent advocates that you're criticizing in this piece? Did you speak to Moms for Liberty? Did you speak to any of the parents who are going to school board meetings? Did you talk to any conservatives? Do you even know any conservatives? Like, do you you just spoke to people in your echo chamber. Okay, got it. The picture that emerges is complex. Old fears about gay people are being combined with newer concerns and newly developed political tools. Parents are largely divided about instructional issues on LGBTQ matters, and the political rhetoric has gotten far more intense, leaving some advocates gaping at its frankness. Quote, the way it used to be written when they ran bills almost 10 years ago, I guess, was that schools shall not promote any other sexuality other than heterosexuality. There was a little bit of indirectness about the language. This is just hitting you in the face, said Chris Sanders, the executive director of the Tennessee Equality Project. Wow, that's a LGBTQ plus gay rights group. There is a gay rights group. I wonder what their opinion's going to be. Like, what do you? You're going to a woke group and you're like, what's your opinion? Did you talk to anyone who's not woke? Did you talk to gays against groomers? Did you talk to any of the gay or trans people who don't line up with woke and don't line up with indoctrinating kids? No? Okay. So this guy, Chris Sanders, said that, pointing to a bill in that state that would prohibit materials that, quote, promote, normalize, support, or address LGBTQ issues. That quote, that signaled to me that we've moved beyond the phase of subtlety altogether, end quote. Here are 6 insights into this rapidly evolving situation and what it means for schools. Number 1, lawmakers introducing these bills echo older fears about LGBTQ people. Since March, the political discourse has been dominated by outrage over Florida's vaguely written bill prohibiting instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity in grades K through 3. I'm actually surprised they included that amount of specificity because normally, in the woke media, the mainstream media, and with the celebrities who all came out to talk about this a year ago, all they did was they called it the Don't Say Gay bill, which is ridiculous. There's nothing in it that says you can't say gay. I'm shocked that they included even this amount of specificity where they're saying, yeah, it was prohibiting instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity to kindergartners through 3rd graders. Defend that, by the way. Do they ever defend that? Like, why they should be able to do that? They don't. Okay, so it says that this is the thing that Republican Governor Ron DeSantis signed into law in March of last year. But Education Week found many other proposals in the state houses that would affect LGBTQ students. About 30 pieces of legislation would variously circumscribe LGBTQ representation in the curriculum, the pronouns that students and teachers can use, and put limits on school clubs, among other things. Those are on top of other proposals seeking to criminalize medical professionals who provide gender-affirming care. Okay, didn't use specific language here, but what they're talking about is what's happened very recently in the past couple of years in Sweden, Norway, Finland, and the UK, which is they've said, you know what? We're going to put a halt on castrating and giving double mastectomies to people who are minors. We're going to put a halt on giving minors, children, people who are under 18, hormones that can sterilize them for life. We're going to stop doing that and we're going to say, you should probably wait till you're 18 to make these permanent decisions for your body and your fertility. That's what they're saying. That's what they're talking about. But Education Week chooses to call it gender affirming care. Okay, those are on top of other proposals seeking to criminalize medical professionals who provide gender affirming care or to limit which sports teams transgender players can participate on. Yeah, because it's not fair for men who have a biological advantage over women on average to take spots and scholarships away from women in women's sports. Now, if you just had everyone on an equal playing field, if there was no sex segregation in sports, if you just had basketball, not men's basketball and women's basketball, but just basketball, there would never be any women on the team. It would basically just be men's basketball. But at least then you could say it doesn't matter. Everyone goes out and competes together, and guess what? It's always men or trans women who get the spots. But that's not what we do. We have women's teams as well. And it's not fair to women to force them to give up scholarships, places at colleges, Olympic medals. I saw one race that happened at the Olympics. I wasn't aware of this when it happened. I just saw Coach Blade, Dr. Linda Blade talking about it on Twitter. And this was a race where the gold, because they just made these new rules in the Olympics where that particular year, the 3 spots in this race, gold, silver, and bronze, went to men. And they've just redone the rules where none of those men could compete anymore. Like if that race had happened today, they wouldn't have been able to compete against the women. And so she was saying, hey, you should go give that gold and silver and bronze medal to the women who got pushed down into 4th, 5th, and 6th place when they were actually gold, silver, and bronze. Like, that sucks. It does suck. Gender affirming care. Okay, now they have the helpful paragraph here. Gender affirming care includes a spectrum of services to validate students' gender identities. It can include counseling, supporting a child's choice to change names and pronouns, or supporting a child's choice to alter dress and presentation. For adolescents, it may eventually include the use of drugs to delay puberty or hormones. Though these are rarer. Are they? They always say it doesn't happen, then they say it's rare, then they say, okay, it happens a lot, but it's good that it's happening. Like, they just always push that line. What do they not say here? Hormones that can sterilize kids for life. Then they say major U.S. and international health organizations do not endorse gender-conforming surgery for minors. Yeah, but it happens here. And these bills are trying to prevent it from happening here. Norway, Finland, Sweden, and the UK are already ahead of us on this. Education Week reached out to some 10 lawmakers who sponsored versions of these bills, seeking their rationale and introducing them. Most did not return phone calls or emails. Those that did, though, variously say they're introducing them to guard parents' rights or prevent indoctrination by teachers, though they were often unclear about what specific impact they expect the laws to have. Representative John Kavanaugh in Arizona was one of the few lawmakers who agreed to speak on the record about the bill he sponsored, which would require parents to give approval for their children to join gay-straight alliances at schools or other such clubs, which is so important, and I'm about to show you a video why. He said his concern was that these clubs could promote or influence controversial lifestyles. Quote, if it's LGBTQ club, if the club is presenting a positive view of that, if it's presenting a belief that it's normal behavior or that this is behavior that should be explored, absolutely they're promoting it, he said, and parents need to consent to something like that. Yes, they do. Asked if he thought that happened routinely, he said, I have no idea. It's what we'll find out once we get these transparency bills through. In Rhode Island, lawmaker Patricia Morgan, who introduced a bill that would, among other things, require schools to address students, quote, by their common names and the pronouns associated with their biological gender, unless parents say otherwise. So this is just about having the parents' approval. This is about parental rights, which is exactly whatever they keep poo-pooing. Oh, they say it's about parental rights. Yeah, it's about parental rights, unless parents say otherwise. This woman said in an interview that she had heard complaints from constituents that some teachers refused to do so. Oh, they refused. They refused to let the parent know what was happening, to get the parents' permission. They took it upon themselves. Though she couldn't name a district that seems to have issued guidelines to that end. She said repeatedly that, quote, activist teachers were trying to delve into the personal and private sexual emotions of children. Yeah, they are. Quote, the school should be informing the parents right away so parents can get professional help for their child, she said. A professional counselor needs to deal with someone, not an ideologically driven teacher. Thank you. God bless this woman. Historians of education say the idea that schools and teachers are indoctrinating students in harmful ideas is a long one that encompasses, for example, fears from the 1930s onward over communism that accumulated in teacher loyalty oaths and other such prescriptions. You know what that was? That was an overcorrection. And a lot of us who've been calling out the woke stuff for a while, we're very afraid of another kind of overcorrection happening here. That's kind of what we're trying to prevent. And periodic debates over everything from evolution to sex education have also contained a subtext about what's age appropriate for students to learn. Quote, this is the quote that gets me. Some of this is political grandstanding and vote pandering, but there's also an authentic anxiety around parents and non-parents alike that America's children are being Pied Pipered by these vague and distant threats. They're invading the community through the schools, says Adam Latz, a professor of education history at the State University of New York, Birmingham. So this makes me furious because they're acting like it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to think that children are being indoctrinated and Pied Pipered, as he puts it. I was Pied Pipered. I was indoctrinated. And for me, it didn't happen until later, from the ages of like 17 to 20. It didn't happen to me until college. I entered college at 17. So I cannot imagine it. I spent more than 20 years in this ideology. Those of you that watch this channel regularly know my story, but I don't, if I had been indoctrinated in elementary school or in kindergarten, like a lot of these kids are today, I don't know if I ever would have made it out. I don't know if I'd even be here. I have no idea what's going to happen to this generation, but I'm pretty worried about it because of this high dose of indoctrination they're getting at such a young age. They are being Pied Pipered. And as someone else pointed out, this here, it's not a vague and distant threat, Adam. It is a clear and present danger, what's happening in the schools. And we see the evidence of how it's a clear and present danger in the rates, the skyrocketing rates of kids who are preteens who are now saying, "Oh, I'm trans too." And all their peer group is saying, "Me too." And the skyrocketing rates of adolescent suicide, anxiety, depression, medication. I don't know what's going to happen to them, but this part makes me furious. Oh, they're being Pied Pipered. I was Pied Pipered. And it's not a matter of like, oh, education level or intelligence. I get so sick of these. Sometimes you meet these people who on the right who are like, this is a very, very small fraction of people. This is not the majority by any stretch of the imagination. It's maybe 2%. I don't know. It's very small. But you sometimes meet these people, and there were some in my comments today who were like, uh, well, I was never woke because I'm not an idiot, or like, like I'm smart and I believe in reason. It's like, dude, again, look at the history of cults. There's a lot of intelligent people in cults. And if you think that intelligence alone, and you have kids and you're like, oh, they have a high IQ or they're going to good school, they're not going to fall into this. You are delusional. You may have a high IQ, but you're pretty dumb if you think that. I went to Duke University. It's grade school. I went to a science and math high school. I still fell into it. A lot of my peers that went to science and math high school who were smarter than me, we were supposedly the best and brightest in the state. You had to apply to get in, as it was a residential school. A lot of my peers who were smarter than me who went to that school are still in woke. So don't tell me it's an intelligence thing. It's like the Thomas Sowell quote about some ideas are so stupid only an intellectual could believe them. And that's true for cults. Like, that is very true for cults. Okay. So here's where they poo-poo the idea again that this is happening. The idea that gay teachers are recruiting students who need to be protected is a particularly vicious theme. And by the way, it's not gay teachers. That's a straw man. It's woke teachers. It's woke. It's about ideology. It's not about, oh, black teachers or female teachers or gay teachers. It's just about whether they're woke or not. The idea that gay teachers are recruiting students who need to be protected is a particularly vicious theme that recalls the latter half of the 20th century, Latt said, which at that time resulted in the firing of scores of teachers, a process usually spearheaded by state lawmakers, but was also supported by teachers' unions, cities, and others. Not until 2020 did the U.S. Supreme Court rule that employees cannot be fired for being gay. The parents' right. Let me just pause 1 second before we get into part 2 of this. What time is it? Okay, we still have time. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Sorry, I haven't been looking at the chat because I've been reading this and deep in my ranting phase. This article really bothered me. Like, what are you talking about? Wake up. Pretzel logic, says Davina Duckworth. And now I'm hungry. Yeah, you and me both. Okay. Oh, Dion says that's a George Orwell quote. Is it? I always saw it attributed to Thomas Sowell. Some ideas are so stupid that only intellectuals believe them. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Rib also says, no, it's Orwell. Oh, thank you. Okay. By the way, if you like the video, since I'm taking a quick break, hit like. That would help the channel. If you like the kind of stuff we talk about here. And I didn't say it up top, but I'll say it now. If you are a regular viewer and want to support the channel, we have a Subscribe Star, YouTube memberships, or you can join at Locals or Patreon. Subscribe Star, out of all those, is probably the best. But you can just pick whichever one you want, and it's truly appreciated. So thank you very much. Okay. We're going to pick up on part 2. Let's hope my voice stays working through the end of this. Okay. That's the thing about when you are just doing the video by yourself and talking about something that's of interest to you without someone else there in the conversation style, which is what I mostly used to do, is your voice. It's like, you never rest it really. Okay. Number 2 in this Education Week piece, the parents' rights framing has a long history. Again, they have this they're just poo-pooing the idea of parental rights, even though when they try and explain things, they can't do so without saying it's about parental rights. It's like they simultaneously want to say it's not really about parental rights. And then, but if they have to define something like they did in that example of the bill that would say, you have to call the child by their actual name and their actual real pronouns, if we're reality based here, unless their parents have given permission. Otherwise, that's a parental rights thing. They had to spell it out, and it's like they can do that. On the one hand, there's this cognitive dissonance where they're explaining something and showing how it's parental rights while also poo-pooing the idea that parental rights is a thing. Okay. The parental rights framing has a long history. Parents' rights recently became a rallying cry again following a widely publicized gaffe in late 2021 by Virginia gubernatorial Democratic candidate Terry what's that guy's name? McAuliffe. Don't laugh at me. It's been a while. I don't know all these politicians. Who, when asked about opting students out of lessons on books parents objected to, said that he didn't think parents, quote, should be telling schools what they should teach. Oh, really? Because it's up to the parents what their kids learn. This comes down to who do you think owns kids, for lack of a better word? Who's responsible for children? And unfortunately, I think a lot who are in the woke world have slowly come to believe, whether they've ever consciously grappled with the question or not, I think they've slowly come to accept that the government has more of a right to your children than you do. That the government should be deciding what your kids learn and how. And it slipped out with this Democratic candidate in Virginia. he didn't think parents, quote, should be telling schools what they should teach. Okay. Republicans seized on the opening, claiming the banner of the Party of Parents and championing new parents' rights and curriculum transparency bills. The push for parents' rights in schools also has a long history, and variations on this go back to the 1980s and 1990s when it was a key part of a campaign to legalize homeschooling across the states. And it has periodically resurged. In 2009, Republican lawmakers unsuccessfully sought to make it a wedge issue. Politico reported at the time. Oh, okay. It was the Republicans who tried. It was just the Republicans who tried to make a wedge issue, though, guys, not the Democrats, just one party. It's always both. Legislative templates on parents' rights have thus been floating around legislatures for decades. They've been sponsored in federal legislation as an amendment to the U.S. Constitution. The text of such measures has now evolved to add new provisions on the teaching of race, and on how LGBTQ people can be addressed or portrayed in curriculum. Quote, these bills are legislative veterans of generations of fights over identity in schools. There's language in there that you can trace back to the 90s, early 2000s, and 2010s, said Jeremy Young, the senior manager of free expression and education at PEN America, an anti-censorship group. Those who support the thrust behind this legislation, though, say the pandemic and remote schooling gave parents a closer look at what students were learning, and many weren't happy with what they saw. This is true. The pandemic, one of the silver linings was it was the first time a lot of parents saw the indoctrination happening at schools. Quote, I think schools have started to deviate from the core mission of educating kids in the basic things they need to exist in society. Yeah, math and reading and science and history. And the pandemic in particular gave a lot of parents a window into what their kids are being taught and realized a lot of it looks like political indoctrination, said Luke Berg, an attorney at the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, a conservative firm focused on individual rights cases. The organization supports a bill in the state to give parents the final word over students' name and gender pronouns. Yeah, parents should have the final word. I want to just go up here for a second. Let's go back to that quote that slipped out from this Democrat. He didn't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. I'm going to stop sharing this for a second. This keeps happening. They keep letting this slip about who they think owns your kids. And one of those times was here. Let's see. Do you guys remember? Do you know who Melissa Harris Perry is on MSNBC? When I was woke, I really loved this lady. I got to meet her a couple times. It's so crazy sometimes to see where I'm at now and, where I was then and how intellectually lazy I was. Okay. In case you didn't see this way back then, it's not been that long. I think it's just been a couple years. I'm going to share this with you, although I think it opened in a... Oh, there it is. Oh, I can't find it. You know why? Because when I'm looking for the links, it doesn't say Twitter anymore. It says X. So I was like, what is this? Okay. I'm going to play this clip from Melissa Harris Perry. Now, she is a big, like Rachel Maddow, she's one of these talking heads on the left. I don't know if she's still on MSNBC, but she was at the time, big star on MSNBC. And this is what she said.
We have never invested as much in public education as we should have because we've always had kind of a private notion of children. Your kid is yours and totally your responsibility. We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children. So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families and recognize that kids belong to whole communities. Once it's everybody's responsibility and not just the households, then we start making better investments.
Did you hear what she said? If you're on the left and you're watching this, and I really hope you are, do you agree with that? We have to break through this idea that your kids belong to you. No, they belong to the communities, and you know what she really means by communities. Don't you think she means the state? How does a community determine what your kids are learning at school? How does that get done? By government, whether small local government or a federal government, panels and committees. And so when you say your kids belong to she says to communities, but how does that functionally work when it comes to what your kids are learning in schools? She means the government. Your kids belong to the government. If you're on the left and you disagree, tell me why. How does and tell me how do you answer that question if kids don't belong to it's not up to the parents or the final buck in what they're learning? Who is?
Parents, or kids belong to their idea that kids, part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families and recognize that kids belong to whole communities. Once it's everybody's responsibility and not just the households, then we start making better investments.
It's not everybody's responsibility. Like, this is very frightening what she said. Okay, and then this is all over the place though. And there was a recent quote as well, this one from Kamala Harris, Vice President, affirmative action hire. And I will say that because Joe Biden is the one who came out and told us before he picked her, I don't know who I'm picking, but I know it will be a woman, which is so freaking insulting to the person he picked. To say up front, I'm going to pick the best woman. Like, that's so insulting. I'd rather not be picked at all. So here she is.
But I mean, truly, when when you see our kids, and I truly believe that they are our children, they are the children of our country, of our communities. I mean, our future is really bright if we prioritize them, and therefore prioritize the climate crisis and the need to address.
Okay, I just thought this was interesting because of some of the same language she's using that Melissa Harris Perry used a couple years ago, which is the children belong to communities. By the way, she's using a lot of the same words. What's that famous quote by the bad guy who shall not be named that we started off with, who talks about if you own the kids, you own the future. And here she's talking about the future. The kids are owned by the community and our country. What does that mean? I think it means the government. You can tell me if you disagree. I think she means the government. Our future's bright. We've got to prioritize them and the climate crisis, like, which is what they're using kids to push through right now. To push through an expansion of government and even further government control and using climate to do it. Using the COVID blueprint, but switching to climate. Okay. They do this very often now. It's gotten to where they kind of, what's that expression I see a lot on Twitter? They say the quiet part out loud now. Yeah. They do that. They outright admit, parental rights. Pfft. You think you're the final say in what happens with your kids? The government's the final say. We decide what your kids learn. Okay, I just want to go back to this article for one more minute or a couple minutes. Let's see. Okay, so we're going back to this Education Week article where he's poo-pooing the idea that your kids are being indoctrinated in schools. He says, number 3, the issues may be old, but the political tools are new. For some observers, the new wave of legislation represents a particularly cynical brand of politics, a way of riding the coattails of the nation's current frenzy about school indoctrination to pass policies about LGBTQ people, some of which might be unpopular on their own. It's old wine in new bottles, they say. You know what's old wine in new bottles? social justice, so-called anti-racism, critical race theory, queer theory. This is old wine in new bottles. This is racism and sexism dressed up as the opposite. It's like the devil found a new way to sell some, like a very old idea. If you go into a school and you're teaching kids that the best way to view the world is as a competition for power between identity groups, and that we need to redistribute power between those identity groups, and so therefore we need to judge and treat people differently based on which identity group they're in, and some people need to check their privilege because they're in this group, and they need to sit down and shut up and listen because they're in this group, and other people don't have to sit down and shut up and listen because they're in this group. And some people need to have standards lowered because they're in this group. And other people, like Asian people, need to be discriminated against because they're in this group. If you're learning that in school, you're just learning old wine in a new bottle. You're learning everything that drives the same old isms, bigotry, everything throughout history. You're just learning it in new packaging. Oh, now it's called anti-racism. Got it. It's not liberalism. That's not what they're teaching. This isn't about left or right. They try and use that existing, because they're so good at dividing us along that left and right paradigm. It's like they try and use that, and it works on the people who are still in that frame of mind, who don't get it. That's why people who are in that frame of mind, and especially if they're on the left and they look at people, like I mentioned before, like Jimmy Dore, progressives, they look at people like RFK Jr., they look at people like me. It does a whole spectrum of people who are not in woke for whatever reason. And they say, or maybe like RFK, not in a part of woke, but he's still in it in some other ways. But they look at them and say, oh, right wingers. Because that's all they don't know. That's all they know. They're so plugged into this. Oh, the world is right and left. If you're not saying what I'm saying, you must be on the right. Like, they don't know. Anyway, old wine in a new bottle. Quote, these are movements that have been around for a while, said Young of PEN, of the proposals. The critical race theory frame and curriculum transparency frame are new and have been wildly successful, in part because there's smart framing and smart politics, and in part because it's because there's an incredible amount of national money going to support them, and from their proponents' view, a degree of success at the ballot box. Do you know why they've been wildly successful, Mr. Young? Because they're talking about a real epidemic that's happening at schools where children are being indoctrinated, and those of us who've left indoctrination, who've left that ideology, are speaking out about it. Those who've never been in it but can see it for what it is are speaking out about it, and parents are finally, because of the COVID years, starting to see it and put two and two together and understand what it is, and they're finding the language to describe it. And that's why these bills are wildly successful, because parents are busy fighting an evil that has been happening in schools against their children. Political scientists as well as advocates divide those who are pushing these bills for political purposes from a smaller subset of people that includes many evangelical Christians and others who are opposed on religious grounds or who view LGBTQ people as somehow a threat to traditional nuclear family culture. Quote, I think there is a pragmatic wing that sees this as an opportunity to get certain types of voters to the polls in the midterms, said Zane Murib, a political scientist at Fordham University in New York City. And I think there is a very strong ideological current that really does believe the heart and soul of America is at stake. Yeah, we really do believe it. Because it is. And being threatened by trans people, by gays and lesbians, by undocumented people. No, here's where you get it wrong. Here's where you get it wrong, Murib. Record scratch. The heart and soul of America is at stake. It is being threatened. But you know what? It's not being threatened by trans people, by gays and lesbians, by undocumented people. It's being threatened by woke people. It's an ideology. It doesn't matter what you freaking look like on the outside, what your identity is, what race you are, or sex, or none of that matters. You guys who are pushing this ideology, who are in this ideology, which every single person who's been interviewed in this Education Week piece is in the same ideology. You guys are using trans people, gays and lesbians, undocumented people, Black people, women, the list goes on. You're using all these groups to say, if you oppose us, you oppose all these groups. It's bullshit. Why didn't you go interview a trans person or gay and lesbian person or undocumented person who doesn't agree with this bullshit? Because that would expose the fact that you don't speak for these groups. So I don't know if you're dishonest or you truly don't get it, but this right here is where you lost the plot. Yes, the heart and soul of America is at stake, but it's not being threatened by these groups you named. It's being threatened by anyone who shares your ideology, social justice or woke ideology. Guess what? It's a lot of white women who are in that belief system. Incidentally. Merab's view was seconded by Sanders, the executive director of the Tennessee Equality Project. Oh, everyone we interviewed agrees with one another. What are the chances? What has crystallized it is the Virginia governor's race. Some of these proposals existed before this, but their power has come in the wake of it, and I think they're just testing to see whether they will work, he said. And it's working in some places, but I don't think parental rights means the same thing to every set of parents. Exit polls in the Virginia contest, for example, found voters about evenly split on which candidate would do the best job on education, though those favoring the contest's eventual winner, Glenn Youngkin, were more likely to cite parent control over curricula in this context. And other communities have rejected political bids that have relied heavily on anti-LGBTQ platforms or messaging. That happened, for example, in a recent school board race in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. All three candidates who raised concerns about the district's approach to gender identity lost. Number 4, states have historically not given schools much guidance, and public attitudes about LGBTQ issues in schools are complex. What makes the surge of legislative interest particularly complicated is that states have historically not provided much guidance on how much their schools should address LGBTQ issues. In the 1980s and 90s, during the height of the HIV epidemic, a number of states passed laws prescribing mention of homosexuality. Many, but not all, have since been rolled back. About 6 states now require LGBTQ history to be taught as part of the curriculum or mandate that LGBTQ people be represented in teaching materials. But most states do not prescribe much in the way of how LGBTQ issues should be handled, even in sex education, leaving a lot of discretion to the nation's 13,000 school districts. That's probably one reason why, like the discussion over race, so much of discourse has focused on a handful of local examples. Schools are all over the place in what they teach and what materials they choose. National polling shows most Americans are comfortable with gay and lesbian teachers, and about 6 in 10 say they are comfortable with an elementary level transgender teacher, according to an analysis by the Survey Center on American Life, a project of the American Enterprise Institute, a think tank. But things get dicey with curriculum. Wow, it's almost like this disproves what you guys are saying. It's almost like people are actually opposed to the curriculum and the indoctrination and not to whether or not the teacher is gay. You know? It's almost like this disproves what you're saying. Only about 54% were comfortable with LGBTQ figures in elementary reading materials, and the figure was lower among parents. At least one recent poll by Public Opinion Strategies, a polling firm begun by 3 conservative political campaign managers, found that about 2/3 of American voters said it was inappropriate for schools to discuss gender identity with K through 3rd grade students, suggesting parents' concerns may be concentrated in the youngest grades. Again, I wonder why that is. Why do you think it is the kindergarten age, like 4 and 5-year-olds through 3rd graders? Why do you think it's that younger age group that parents are most concerned with making sure that you don't talk about inappropriate things with? Why might that be the case? It's like sometimes I read a leftist piece like this, I feel like they don't have This guy, again, it's not about intelligence. He could be very smart. I don't know. But he doesn't have that common sense hat on. And also because if you're writing something and reading stuff in an echo chamber like I used to be in, you kind of got these blinders on for certain things and you just can't see it. But it's still amazing to read it. Like, yeah, he's writing this and does it not strike him that maybe the parents have a reason to be most concerned about their youngest, most precious children at their most malleable age, their most impressionable age, learning about things that are not appropriate for a kindergartner. He says a similar phenomenon has played out in national polls about how race and the institution of slavery is taught in the U.S. social studies courses. Yeah. With support dropping for instruction in the elementary grades compared to secondary levels. Yes. The more explicit you get and the more, age appropriate you get, it should be for corresponding ages. Like, why is this it's not a new idea to say there are certain concepts that you shouldn't learn about until you're older. Libraries, public school libraries, they have this system for what age group this is appropriate for. Like, this has always happened. But for the first time, because this woke ideology, social justice ideology, because the trans part of it has infiltrated to such a degree and has infiltrated into the schools to such a degree, under this like inclusion mask. It's an identity, right? It's inclusion. We need to be in every grade. You need to start teaching babies about us, right? It's like, no, you don't need to bring that into the schools. And then they would argue something like, oh, well, you've got to teach about trans because otherwise, how are children going to learn not to bully people who are different? Like they've always learned. Like they've always learned. Nobody's going in saying, let's pick an identity that's real, that everyone can agree they don't want their kids learning about at the age of 5, for example. A murderer. Let's pick someone we can all agree on. So I'm picking the most extreme example. Nobody's going in saying, you know what we need? Serial killer drag hour. We need to teach kids to not judge people because they're different or they've made mistakes. And we really need to have more murderers in the curriculum and in the classroom, and diversity is our strength. And there's murderers out there and kids need to know about it. And some murderers repent. And so let's just start doing serial killer story hours so kids like can really learn about diversity and inclusion. Nobody's doing that. I know that's an extreme example. I use an extreme example on purpose because I want to use someone that everyone would be like, nah, no. No, that doesn't happen. To illustrate a point. Kind of rambling. Okay. Here we go. We're just going to finish up this article and then I've got a couple more things for you. An Education Week Research Center poll found that about half of teachers said that they thought they should teach about LGBTQ topics. Fear about parents' reactions and a lack of good teaching materials are among the reasons for their hesitation. Yeah, you should be afraid about parents' reactions, probably. How old are the kids that you're teaching? First of all, what are you teaching? Second of all, if you look on TikTok, it's like Libs of TikTok is a great account that highlights these if you're on Twitter. Every week you see more of these videos of teachers, elementary school teachers recording themselves, first of all, thinking this is a good idea to put online and talking about how they're so excited because today they came out to their class as NB, non-binary, and they gave their new pronouns to their students, and they got validation from 5-year-olds and asked to be called mix instead of miss or mister, and explained what that means because they're not a man or a woman. And they need validation from 5-year-olds. That's what kindergarten or first grade is supposed to be about? No, that's not what it's about. It's not a big group therapy session for you where you get validation from 5-year-old kids. You should be afraid of parents' reactions if you're doing that kind of stuff. Bills about transgender students are being coupled with aggressive new rhetoric and are heightening advocates' concerns. From bathroom bills in 2017 to the more recent focus on transgender students in sports and gender-affirming care, there's that phrase again, the issue has shot to the top of cable news coverage and think tank agendas. Groups like the Conservative Heritage Foundation have recently accused schools of promoting, quote, a radical gender ideology. They are promoting a radical gender ideology. I can tell you this. I can tell you this as someone who picked up the radical gender ideology in college at Duke University in the late 90s. That same freaking radical gender ideology I picked up then is now in the public schools. It is in elementary schools, yes. Far-right news sites have picked this up and amplified a similar language. It's not just far-right, guys. The focus on students' pronouns and who can select them, how schools should interact with trans students, and increasingly on gender-affirming care seems to have boomed following the U.S. Supreme Court's 2015 ruling establishing the right of gay people to marry, said Murib. Quote, it's another way to assert what's really white evangelicals' core set of values. Men and women make up the nuclear family that is reproductive, they said. Here's the thing. If you look at statistics about public opinion on gay marriage, you will see it became overwhelmingly majority affirming of gay marriage since 2015. The vast majority of people agree with gay marriage rights. That happened. Not what they're saying happened. They're saying that the reason parents are now pushing back and the reason parents think their kids are being indoctrinated and the reason parents want to know what curriculum you're teaching, what ideology you might be pushing, the reason parents want to make sure you get their permission to sign their kids up for groups, after school groups, or to call their kids a different pronoun than what they are. They're saying this is all fallout because of the gay marriage decision in 2015. That's not true. Read the statistics. Look up public opinion about gay marriage over the decades, and you will see it's overwhelmingly positive. It's not what they're saying. But then they've got their boogeymen in here, white evangelicals, okay? No, the reason why all of this is happening, it's not because of the 2015 gay marriage ruling, no. It's because of what you guys have been pushing in the public schools in the past 5 years or so. Probably before that, quite honestly. One day I want to do a timeline of like when it started really getting into, and of course it was in some states like California before it was in others, but when did it really start getting into elementary school? I know at the university level, I picked it up in the late 90s. That's a while ago. But in the elementary schools, the reason this has exploded is because parents are now aware of what you've been pushing there, of the social justice ideology you've been pushing. It's not because of the 2015 gay rights decision, which almost everyone supports. But what's at stake here is not merely political rhetoric, but an existential threat to transgender people, Murib said. No, the existential threat that's happening right now is to children who are in public schools and to Western civilization. That's what's happening here. Quote, at this point, it's bordering on existence. It's about the existence of LGBTQ people, and particularly trans people at this moment, they said. This legislation is trying to erase trans youth. What's a trans youth? Do you mean a gender nonconforming child? Why are you trying to say they're trans? So a very effeminate boy, you're saying, well, he must be a girl? That's like a really, really, really rigid idea of gender that you have there. Not very fluid, is it? Why are you targeting gender nonconforming kids and pushing them into sterilizing hormones and mutilation? It's funny because these people will hold signs at protests and stuff like protect trans youth. Yeah, we're trying to protect them from you. Like it's like seeing in Little Red Riding Hood the wolf dressed up in grandma's clothes, like, with a sign like watch out for wolves, and you're like, "Hey." Yeah, don't let a wolf eat you. It has significant effect on them, and they are there. They are hearing this, says Mirab. LGBTQ, or they are not there, by the way. They are not by any stretch of the imagination. That's part of the problem. Historically, people with gender dysphoria represent less than 1% of the population. What's happened since they've been indoctrinating kids and putting this in schools, it's exploded. And you've got all these kids now who are jumping on this bandwagon and saying, yeah, me too, I'm trans too. The problem is, unlike the bandwagons of social contagions of when we grew up, these have lasting, like permanent effects on their bodies and on their ability to have kids. So it's not like, oh yeah, I went through a goth stage like some of us did, or emo stage, or whatever. This is like, yeah, I went through this stage and cut my body parts off and sterilized myself, and my parents let me do it, and the school pushed me into it and said it was cool. That's what's happening to kids today. And that's why you see so many of these detransitioners now who are blessedly, a lot of them, speaking out despite being demonized and attacked by the very people who used to hold them up as the face of the movement. This guy, this organization is talking right here, what he calls trans youth. He doesn't care about them once they come out and say, yeah, I'm going to sue the hospitals because they shouldn't have performed this surgery on me when I was a child. I couldn't consent. They reject those kids when they detransition. LGBTQ organizations have raised the alarm in part because some youth are not comfortable discussing feelings of gender dysphoria with their parents, fearing abuse or other consequences, and LGBTQ youth are overrepresented in estimates of youth homelessness. A large proportion of homeless LGBTQ people say they face stigma or discrimination at home. Education Week asked the lawmakers about these concerns. Morgan dismissed them. Quote, it may be jarring to a parent at the beginning, but in the end, a parent will always work in the best interest of the child, she said. Will they? Because I know a lot of parents who are not working in the best interest in the child because all they're doing is validating, and they're not protecting their kids from this predatory ideology, and they're even taking them to doctors to get their body parts removed and then taking pictures with them afterwards, like all excited about it. Sterilizing their own children. There is a devouring mother archetype. In Arizona, Kavanaugh said, quote, those parents should be arrested for endangering the welfare of their children, and they should be put into foster care or put into a better environment. Quite frankly, if the parents are like that, maybe the child is better off elsewhere. Number 6, emergent nonprofit groups are fueling the flames. Increasingly, the discourse about LGBTQ issues in schools is being echoed and promoted by newly emergent parent advocacy networks like Parents Defending Public Education, No Left Turn in Education, and Moms for Liberty. Yeah, they got a mention. Did they get interviewed? You'll see. In 2021, such groups collected purported instances of school-based indoctrination over race. Now they are also collecting them over supposed gender-related indoctrination. Some of these groups grew out of parent frustrations over pandemic-related schooling issues, including masking, and are now evolving to advocate on other topics, according to a new report from Future Ed, a research group at Georgetown University. It's not yet clear whether they are entirely funded by members or whether they're receiving other operating support. Both Parents Defending Education and No Left Turn in Education were incorporated as nonprofits in 2021. So far, neither appears to have filed annual required federal financial disclosure forms. Moms for Liberty is in the process of becoming a nonprofit and will file its disclosure form by May, a co-founder of the organization said. The language fomented by some of these groups and by politicians has taken a darker turn in recent weeks. DeSantis, widely considered a 2024 presidential candidate, said during the recent bill signing in Florida that it's a necessary counter to those who embrace, quote, woke gender ideology, and that his political opponents, quote, support sexualizing kids in kindergarten. They do. His spokesperson has called the bill an anti-grooming measure. Such ideas are now being repeated by influential pundits. Christopher Rufo, who works at the Manhattan Institute, a think tank, last year fanned the flames of alleged race-based indoctrination in schools. In new Twitter threads, he has cast schools as a major locus for sexual abuse. Yeah. Analysts at more moderate think tanks are now beginning to entertain similar critiques. Great. Because it's true. Stephen Salchuk. It's so funny. It's like at the end, he finally mentions some groups that disagree with him, but it's like, did you interview them? Did you include what they have to say here? No. Why? Because it doesn't agree with what you and everyone you interviewed had to say. Okay, guys. My voice is still here, but give me 1 second. Coffee will help. So, one of the things, let me show you this real quick. I'm not going to stay on this, but I had this pulled up and I just saw it. This is an example of the mainstream media, the woke media, attacking Moms for Liberty, like I mentioned earlier. We're not going to read this after all, but there are tons of articles like this. At the beginning, where I showed you that quote of the horrific leader, as they called him, and the reason they used it, these are the headlines it produced. This is MSNBC headline: "An ominous Hitler quote highlights Moms for Liberty's extremism." What? That's what I'm talking about. Anyway, that's just an example. That's the kind of propaganda they're pushing on us. Z Highness. Oh no, we need your voice. Thank you. I just ranted a little too much. Well, that article is kind of long, but I wanted to read it because it's, I don't know, I think it's it's symbolic. That's how so many people I know who are still in that world think. They think it's all this crazy right-wing conspiracy theory. They don't understand what we're saying. I guess I would say this to them, and then we can, if we have time, I can look at some of these other things I have queued up. What I guess I would ask them, do you think it's possible to raise a child, first of all, without a belief system? And maybe you, if you're listening today, do you think it's possible to raise a child without a belief system? And by belief system, I mean a way of looking at the world and interpreting how the world operates. A way of understanding reality and mankind. Do you think it's possible to raise a child without that? Because I think some people on the left do. And I think they're delusional. Yeah, I agree with you. No. I used to be one of those people. I thought, oh, and I know many people on the left who do this are like, I'm not going to raise my child with a belief system. Or I know some who were raised in the church and had a bad experience with the church. And so they're like, well, I'm not going to raise my child in the church, or even let their grandparents take them to a church, or, I'm not going to let them step foot in that place. I'm not going to give them. Why? Because I'm going to let my child decide for themselves what they believe. Now, this sounds really good. Maybe if you're a conservative or anti-woke or whatever, and you've never been on the left, or maybe a libertarian who's never been on the left, or ANCAP, or whatever you are, maybe this doesn't sound good to you because you can see through it. But for those of us who've been on the left, this all sounds very well and good. It's like, oh yeah, a blank slate. A child is a blank slate, and I'm not going to give them a belief system or a way of interpreting the world, because that's not fair to them to be instilled with this from an adult. And I'm going to let them go out into the world and, send them to school and send them out to socialize and out into the woods, the dark wood, right? And they're going to figure things out on their own and come out with a belief system that's authentically theirs. And it's so idealistic, and I think it's so, now I used to believe that. Now I think it's so delusional. Your children are looking to you for truth, to direct them towards truth, reality, to help them separate reality from fantasy, to help them understand how to interpret the world. And if I firmly believe, if you don't give a young person a method of interpreting the world, a belief system, an ideology, what have you, that they will develop. Yes, they'll develop one, but it's not going to be authentically theirs. Like, this sort of like, they'll just pick one up. No, someone else is going to give them one. Their school, in a lot of cases, is going to give them one. Their peers. If you don't give them a system of morality, of what's right and wrong, I think that's part of the instruction of parents. You're supposed to be helping them not just learn the difference between reality and fantasy, but to learn what's right and wrong. And if you're not teaching them that, someone else is going to give them a system of morality. Woke is an upside down system of morality. It functions as a system of morality for some people. When I say upside down, I mean because everything it teaches is the opposite of what should be taught, I believe. They don't teach you to judge and treat people as individuals based on their character. They don't teach that that's what's right. They say that's wrong. They teach kids it's right to look at what race people are and what sex they are and what sexuality they are, and treat them accordingly, according to what identity groups they're in. No, it's upside down. You don't do that. They're giving them a very flawed, perverted sense of morality. And so I think now, if I'm lucky enough to have children, I'm definitely, I know what my belief system is now. I know what I think the truth is. And I intend to, raise them in the church, because I want to set them up. I want to prepare them to have the best possible experience in life and the biggest chance of success, not just here on earth, but beyond. Like, I want the best for them. So you're going to give them those tools. I'm not going to be like, I hope you figure it out. Like, in the interest of protecting your blank slate, I'm going to send you out there to pick it up from someone else. But I won't be telling you what I believe. I won't be telling you the best way I think to interpret the world. As your parent, I'll let people do it for me. Like, what? Oh, it's just so silly, isn't it? Oh, Stanley says this new wokeism is a religion and not all religions are equal. Yes, it is a religion. And you're right. Some religions, like this one, pretty shitty, I have to say. So I guess I would ask those people, yeah, do you think it's possible to raise a child without a system of belief, or to live without a system of belief? And if they said yes, well, then we probably wouldn't even get to the indoctrination and the woke stuff, because then it would be stuck. Like, I think in conversation, if you want to have a real conversation, you have to get down to the point at which, like, if you're disassembling a wall, you have to get all the way down to the bricks in the foundation where you guys first disagree, where we first disagree and start to go in different directions. It doesn't help me to start a conversation with someone who disagrees that woke indoctrination. Oh, I don't agree. Woke indoctrination is happening in schools. Okay, I need to find out first before we can talk about that. Like, if you think that it's possible to live in the world without a system of belief or without a way of interpreting the world, or to raise your kids without that, then we can't even get up here. Like, we have to start here because this is the root of where we disagree, right? So that's what I would ask them first. And if you have those kind of conversations with people, see what they think about that. And then practice articulating what you believe with them. Thomas, you can't be sentient without a belief system. Yeah, I think that's probably right. Davina says, I don't even like using the word woke. It's stupid and false. Yeah. Well, because they're not awake. It's weird how that became the most popular term to describe it, isn't it? So if you talk to someone who's on the left, and maybe there's someone on the left listening who, to that question, they understand what I'm saying and they say, okay, no, I know that, all people have some type of belief system or way of organizing information and interpreting the world, and everyone has some kind of ideology or belief system. If you have somebody with that answer, then I think where you might disagree after that, if you're still together on that point, where you might disagree is that they don't see woke as a belief system. That's the next big stumbling block you'll encounter when you're talking with someone about this if they disagree with you. Because it's almost like a fish doesn't see the water. Like, what water? It's all around them. When you're in it, you don't see it as an ideology or a belief system. When I got into it, it's not like my new belief system, my Christian belief system, which I chose consciously and thoughtfully after exploring and searching for truth for several years, in all kinds of directions. It's not like that, where you go into a place, you're searching for truth, and you're going to churches maybe or what have you. Or it's not even like a dark version of that where you go into a cult, like where they're like, come on in. It's not like going into, what do they call the Scientology centers? It's not like that. So I think that makes it hard to identify as a cult sometimes, because when I got indoctrinated, it wasn't like I went to the social justice place of worship and I'm here, guys, to see what you guys are about. I did go to several social justice places of worship. They didn't call themselves that. So I don't know if you can tell what I'm saying. That I went to, for example, an Amnesty International conference where it was my first struggle session / brainwashing session. It was called Dismantling Racism. This was in 1996 or 7. And that is a kind of social justice church. If you've ever been to one of these struggle session trainings, brainwashings, more like, where they're reteaching you words, they're programming you, they're changing your language. Racism is prejudice plus power. It's not what you think it is. That's where I first learned some of that stuff. That's where I was first programmed with some of that crap. Picked it up there. But so it's harder to identify as a cult because people don't, they're not walking into a place that's like the Church of Woke. Welcome to church. So that it takes a while to see, it functions just like a religion. They are giving in schools, they're giving your kids a way of looking at the world and interpreting the world. And they're saying the best way to look at the world is as the struggle for power among identity groups. And we could, their oppression exists, and it exists because some identity groups have more power than others, and they oppress the ones without power. And if we have to treat people differently based on which of these groups they're in until we reach a level of equity or equality where everything's awesome, And so that's why we have to judge and treat people differently based on what racial groups they're in and what sex groups they're in and sexuality groups, because we have to reach this level. We have to reach this level of equality. And that's a belief system. That's a belief that everything is the way the world works is as a system of oppression where some groups have more power than others. Believing in the patriarchy, for example, I mean, that's a belief. They believe in it. They don't recognize it as a belief. They think it's a fact. It's hard for them to see it as a belief system. They think they're just learning facts, hidden by the oppressors. I'm laughing because it's silly to me now, but back then it's like, yeah, oh, of course the man doesn't want me to know this. Of course the man. I don't think they call it the man anymore. That was probably a 90s thing. What do they call it now? They call it white evangelicals now. Of course the white evangelicals don't want me to know this. Thank you, Andrew Jorna, for the super chat, the super sticker. 3 pounds, not lira, pounds today. Thank you, Andrew Joyner. I appreciate it. I'm losing my voice. Okay, I have to show you this before we run out of time. So remember I said earlier we were going to talk about why parents need to be the ones to give permission on what groups their kids are joining. And if you weren't aware of this, parents, a lot of the LGBT plus QI groups where they're pushing queer theory and gender identity, a lot of those groups are now being renamed purposefully by the teachers to hide what they are. And so a lot of them are being called very innocuous things like, an anti-bullying group. They're not even calling them Gay Straight Alliance anymore. They're taking the LGBTQ out of the name and they're calling it things like, anti-bullying group, inclusion group. So anything that's got some vague name that sounds like, we're just palling around and supporting each other and damn with bullying. Definitely find out what's happening in that club if your kids are in that club, because that's a thing that they have admitted they are doing, which is to rename these things to try and hide what they're pushing in these school clubs from parents. Here, I've got to show you just 2 things that relate to this. Here's a teacher. There's so many examples of this. I just picked 2 recent ones. This is a school counselor who, like I said, there's a lot of these videos where they just go on camera and just openly admit what they're doing and what they're going to keep doing. They're like defiant about it. So here's a school counselor who's saying, that he's never going to inform parents if their kid is experimenting with gender or changing pronouns, etc. Here we go.
We have to continue to build up. We have a lot of young people that are living a double life, and then they're trying to access healthcare when they can't even walk into a doctor's office for a yearly physical because they're a minor. And the doctor and the parent and the student are all in there together. The young person are all in there together, and you literally may have a young person not able to tell you where they really are in their gender identity because their guardian or their parent is in the room and it's not accepted, or and they're living that double life. We are constantly navigating, making sure we don't out kids, that when teachers have to call home about academic things, that if we've had a young person confide in us that they are trans or non-gender conforming, non-binary, whatever they're identifying as, making sure that we ask young people, when I call home, what name should I use when I'm speaking?
This is why they call it grooming, by the way, because now this guy, as the school counselor, and he's encouraging other teachers to do this, is forming a more intimate relationship with your child than you have, where secrets are kept from you, the parent. That is grooming. That's what abusers do. That's what they do. They form this intimate bond with you in some way where you're being more intimate with them and you're keeping secrets with them from your parents.
To your parent, I want to make sure I'm respecting your home life as well as your school life, and things like that. So we have to find ways to advocate for the folks who don't have the advocacy by the people that should be giving it to them the most, like our people on the panel are.
There we go. Somebody asked, who is this in the chat? This is a school counselor who basically said he'll never out students who are experimenting with gender identity. They'll never out them to their parents. So, encouraging other teachers as well to establish these intimate relationships with children, intimate in terms of knowledge about them, like getting close to them in a way the parents are not, and to purposefully keep secrets from the parents. It's just you and that kid have that little bond, right? Super gross. That's why it's called grooming. In this case, ideological grooming. There's also this one. I just saw this one. So I was talking with someone yesterday who wasn't aware that Google, for years now, Google has been providing Chromebooks for free to a lot of public schools. And again, a lot of things on the left, like when you first hear them on the left, I know they just hear the good intent. They're like, oh, free computers. How cool of Google. They gave free computers to schools across America, free Chromebooks for the students to use. How cool. That's awesome. You know what else they're doing is they're collecting all that data on your children. Google and the teachers and the school administrators, and looking at everything your kids do on those Google Chromebooks, everything, which makes it easier for them to learn how to target children with advertising, for example, if they know what your kids spend time on online outside of school projects. And it makes it easier for the school teachers and administrators to target your children, stalk, in their own words, stalk your children to get them to join these LGBT plus, groups, these groups where they push woke ideology. This I just saw, and it's a clip from the Megyn Kelly show. Some of you may have seen this. This is crazy. I mean, it's not, it's like, we know they're doing this. A lot of people who follow all this stuff know that they're doing this. It's just always nice when you see them confirm it themselves, and speak the truth of what they're doing. So this is a tweet by Kelly SKE. And she says, this 2021 CTA training leaked audio story by Abigail Schreier awakened California. And so this is from a teachers union. It's audio that someone gave to her, whistleblower, someone gave to her, and she shared this on Megyn Kelly. Just listen to what these teachers are saying. Now, this is about which students they choose to target for these groups.
I believe this teacher is named Kelly Bakari, and it's soundbite 8 talking about how they totally stalked the children. Listen.
So we started to brainstorm at the end of the 2020 school year. What are we going to do? We got to see some kids in person at the end of last year, not many, but a few. So we started to try and identify kids. We totally, when we were doing our virtual learning, totally stalked what they were doing on Google, right, when they weren't doing schoolwork. One of them was Googling translated disability. They're like, check, we're going to invite that kid when we get back on the campus.
Let me just pause this in case it's hard to hear, especially for people who are listening only. This is a teacher saying in a presentation at a teachers union thing, she goes, so we started to brainstorm at the end of the 2020 school year. What are we going to do? We got to see some kids in person at the end of last year, but a few. We got to see some kids, but a few. So we started to try and identify kids. We totally, when they were doing our virtual learning, we totally stalked what they were doing on Google, right? When they weren't doing schoolwork. One of them was Googling Trans Day of Visibility. And we're like, check. We're going to invite that kid when we get back on campus. That's the first half of what this teacher's saying. Let's continue.
We follow like the Google Doodle links or whatever, right? We make note of those kids and the things that they bring up with each other in chats or email or whatever. And we use our observations of kids in the classroom, conversations that we hear to personally invite students, because that's really the way that we kind of get the bodies in the door, right? That they need sort of a little bit of an invitation.
Again, this is, in my opinion, accurately called grooming. Accurately, because they're targeting students. They're trying to form intimacies with them. They're stalking them. She even uses the word stalking. Looking at everything they do online. Here's the second half of what she said. She said, whenever they follow the Google Doodle links or whatever, right? We make note of those kids and the things that they bring up with each other in chats or emails or whatever. They're reading all of their chats. They're reading all their emails. And we use our observation of kids in the classroom and conversations that we hear to personally invite students. Because that's really the way that we kind of get the bodies in the door, right? They need sort of a little bit of an invitation. That just came out this week. July 21st is when this was shared. That's just the most recent example. If you're on the left, I don't know how you can hear something like that, or that previous school counselor we just listened to, and not agree that that's inappropriate. You may not come all the way over here to where I am now, where I think there's an evil indoctrination happening, but can you at the very least say teachers should not be spying on, stalking, in their words, students and figuring out which ones to target for their clubs? Yeah, Dion, it is gross. Your average Patriot nerd says, Big Karen listening in. Yeah. These people have sick and twisted minds and should have nothing to do with children. Yeah. Hey, Judson. He says, I'm about 20 minutes behind. It'll be okay. It will be okay. Excuse me. Anyway, I think both of those last examples are good examples of what the teachers are doing. Good examples of what is called lately. I know the word grooming is overused, but I think they're both very good examples of ideological grooming, where someone in a position of power or authority is trying to create an intimacy with a student, or even stalking that student or spying on them to create that greater intimacy, get them to, personal invitation is the phrase she used, to join a group, and to keep secrets from parents. I think that qualifies. So I wanted to get all into the history of targeting children, evil ideologies targeting children, but it's been a little over 2 hours, and I am losing a little my voice, a little bit of my voice. I'm gonna have to go soon. Here, you know, we're gonna do a part 2, not on Friday, because Friday we're doing Nefarious, but maybe next week we'll do a historical look at some of this stuff. This is one of the pieces I was gonna go over, and if you are on the left and you're watching this, look, I would just ask you, this one is about Mao's Cultural Revolution and the Red Guard, the children that were targeted and used in communist China by Mao. And I would urge you to just read some articles like this, read some interviews, or listen to some interviews with people who were children in the Red Guard. I got to interview Lily Tang Williams a couple years ago. She's a great person to listen to. There are a couple different people like her who are now speaking out in interviews and talking about their background. And there are so many different places you can go to just, like, with an open mind, being someone who's woke or woke adjacent, if you think you have an open mind, then you owe it to yourself to just go and see if there are any similarities. And we're going to do this next week. Once we do it, I'll link the second part below so you can just click on it and go to the second part. But this article here that we're going to look at is 50 Years On, one of Mao's Little Generals exposes the horror of the Cultural Revolution. That's one of the things we're going to look at. And then this, let me show you one other quick thing. I mentioned Lily Tang Williams, but G. Van Fleet is someone else. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's someone I follow on Twitter who similarly escaped and then this is a tweet which I thought was kind of interesting. I saw this one today or yesterday. A cautionary tale for progressive parents. I'll just read this and then we'll close up. Neo Yulan was one of the richest landlords in the Shanxi province in old China. He was known for his progressive and pro-communism political views. He sent his son to the university, a Chinese Ivy League college, where he joined the CCP. The father also donated large sums of money to the CCP to help it fight against the invading Japanese. He was fondly called by the CCP a red landlord. Well, that did not save him during the land reform campaign. As a landlord, he was automatically condemned as the enemy of the state. In a struggle session, villagers put a metal wire through his nose as if he were a cattle, because the Chinese character of his name, Niu, is cattle. His son, now a high CCP official, was asked to parade his father around the village by holding the wire. The son was expected to prove to the party that he could cut off his ties with his enemy father. The father died a few days later in total despair. And there's pictures of them there. This is what always happens over and over and over. If you've heard people say history rhymes, it's because humankind doesn't change. And when you get caught up in one of these evil totalitarian ideologies that says we need to divide people up into groups, into racial groups and wealth groups, or sex-based groups and sexuality groups, and we need to treat everyone differently, and it's about correcting the balance of power or wealth or whatever. It's like it always ends up this way. They always use children. We're going to continue that next week. I'm going to let it go now so I can say, pardon my voice, Voltaire. Thank you, Dion. History never repeats itself, but man always does. Yeah, exactly. Yes, Davina, that's another example. Always ends up this way, right? Always get the knife in the back. Robespierre also led the charge and then ended at the guillotine. Yes, he did. I truly think a lot of the poll that I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of the responses I was getting where people were writing out answers, a lot of the people who seemed to be immune from woke ideology, who never fell into it or could see through it pretty quickly, had a great grasp of history and a great knowledge of history. And I didn't. Like I said, I went to great schools. I had a great history teacher, U.S. history teacher at the Science and Math High School of South Carolina. But it was contained just to U.S. history. And I did not have a great understanding of world history. And when I got to college, anything I took that was like any kind of history class I was taking was through my minor. So it was through the ideological lens of social justice. So I wasn't getting an accurate view of history. And I think that might have helped protect me from falling prey to this crap, from being so gullible. I think a lot of woke people, they don't know shit. Like, I hate to say that. I don't want to sound just like them, because they always talk from this fake intellectual superiority, don't they? I see so many of them on Facebook. They're like, oh, I saw one the other day, this boomer, he's like, he's in the Austin music scene. He's like, oh, Trumpers are stupid. He posted some street trivia quiz thing, and he's like, I'd like to see a Trumper answer this. I'm like, I'd like to see you answer this. Like, why are you posting from this intellectual superiority, dude? They do that all the time. They pretend like they're so smart. And they'll often attack you from that place, that faux intellectualism. I get that a lot online with people who don't know anything about you, and they'll just come in and be like, well, you were obviously raised in a trailer park and you're an idiot. And I'm like, I mean, I guess that's easy to say. If you want to know anything about me, feel free to ask. But of course, they don't want to know anything about you. A lot of times those very same people, they misspell words and they don't know how to use punctuation correctly. And it's like, nah, okay. Anyway, I don't think they're big readers. I really don't. And some of them might have high IQs, but they probably, if they're like me, they quit reading. Because once you get in the cult, the longer you're in it, the more you're discouraged to read any outside source, anything that's not cult approved. And then your passion for reading actually kind of dies because all you're left with is, Robin DiAngelo books and bell hooks. I read a lot of bell hooks. Inga Muscio, like you're sort of left with these are the cult approved things. And some of them are very dry and boring, and you're just reading programming over and over. So I don't think any of them are big readers, regardless of their IQ. Thank you for the super chat, Brett Lanier. Thank you for the $10. Great show, Keri. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for supporting Deprogrammed. I appreciate it. I hope you guys have a good rest of your Monday. Hey, I lived in a trailer park, said Night Train. Well, I have some family who lived in a trailer park. I'm not crapping on it. It's just that they always make that assumption. And I didn't happen to. I happened to be very blessed. I had two parents, middle class income, good, one was an engineer, one's a school teacher. She's making that government money at the public schools. But yeah, I have some look, I'm from South Carolina. Of course I got family in trailer parks, and I'm not saying anything about it. I'm just saying they always jump to that. Like it's like, you trailer park it. I think I've been accused of growing up in a trailer park 3 times this week already. Maybe it's my hat. Like, it doesn't matter where you live or where you came from if you have a working brain. This is very true. I identify as intellectually superior. I always love this lady said. I miss most of it. Cheers, Keri. Thank you very much. Good to see you, 16-bit mascot. Okay. Eminem lived in a trailer park. Well, yeah. If you're growing up in adversity of any kind, including financial adversity, you are probably going to have a lot, if you're a person with a creative brain, a lot to write about or rap about. Selsworth for $4.99. Thank you so much. Says, I recommend reading the sci-fi classic, The Humanoids by Jack Williamson. It deals with questions related to AI and the cult of safetyism and freedom. Dude, thank you for the super chat so much. And I wonder if you're the person who recommended this to me already. Somebody, I recognize this title because I know I already wrote this down. This is on my list. I appreciate it. Marshall, I'm no Eminem, but my name is Marshall. Hey, Marshall Beaufrey. And I also grew up in a trailer park. Well, nice to meet you. And it says nothing about you. But isn't it funny that they go there? That's like the first thing. And they also assume, well, you grew up in a trailer park, you're stupid, Trumper. One person who used that trailer park insult on me also then was posting memes making fun of Trump, and I'm like, what? We weren't even talking about Trump. What what does that have to do with anything? Again, they make all these assumptions. I think they think you're like them, and because they're in the tribe, they get very triggered very easily. If you were to post a meme making fun of Joe Biden, they'd be like, ah! So they think that, well, you must be a Trumper or whatever they think that means, MAGA. I get called MAGA sometimes. I'm like, I don't even know what you mean by that. I mean, I guess I do, but I'm probably not what you mean by that. But anyway, this guy posted these memes of Trump with his daughter Ivanka. Again, this was out of nowhere. This was on a thread where I told Jason Aldean I'm glad he didn't apologize. And this person then puts up Trump memes, and I'm like, so? Like, am I supposed to be like, how dare you? I don't get it. You make a lot of assumptions about what offends me. Aim again, sir. You missed. Anyway. Hey, says Alyssa K, try arguing with vegans if you get bored with lefties. Oh, are they not one and the same? Maybe not. I have argued with vegans before. One time when I was living in LA, Alyssa, I was in Marina Del Rey. Anybody in the LA area knows this beach. And they have all these people who set up sometimes tables and are selling stuff right on the beach, like art and stuff and other things. And this was when I was at the height of woke and everything. And this is where I got my Go Vegetarian bumper sticker that's in the woke therapy comedy video we did. I still have that sticker from way back then. And I will never forget because I went to the table and they had a variety of vegan and vegetarian things to choose from. And I was like, I would like the Go Vegetarian bumper sticker. I was vegetarian at the time. And the person selling it to me is like, well, no, I got one that said Go Vegetarian and I got one that said Go Vegan for my friend who was vegan. So can I have one of the Go Vegan and one of the Go Vegetarian? She was like, well, they should both be Go Vegan, but okay. Like she was judging my purchase. Like, well, why are you selling it if you're going to judge me for not getting the vegan one? Oh, vegetarian's not good enough. Okay. Now we're just rambling. I got to go. Thank you guys for hanging out. Thanks for being here. Thanks for the super chats. Thanks for the comments and saying so many interesting things. We are going to be back on Wednesday night. Mystery Chris and I doing another live popped culture at 8:00 Central. I think I might be on Toxic Femme tonight on Midnight's Edge if I have time to watch the Barbie movie before then. So I'll see you then. But if you're around this afternoon in 30 minutes or so, my husband's going to do an interview on that 70s Rock Fans channel. And I'm very excited for it. And they're going to be talking about music. And he knows a lot about music. It's super interesting. So it should be fun. If you're around, come hang out in the chat with me. Otherwise, I'll see you guys later. I think that's all I had to mention. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Take care, guys. Bye.